So now we are basically going to talk about manipulating a mesh. To manipulate a mesh, first learn and understand something very important. It is the 3D space. The 3D space in which we will be creating, this 3D space is represented by axes in the 3D space. You can see here at the bottom left we have a small logo. This logo is very important. You see that when I move, this logo actually moves as well. This logo indeed represents the axes. These are called axes. There are 3 of them. There is the x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. You have surely heard about this in math, and I assure you, I will keep it much simpler in this story, and it won't take us hours and hours to figure it out. So, to help you understand quickly and clearly, I will draw how the axes are represented in relation to our grid. Regarding our grid, the axis is actually here. It is the x-axis that is predominantly represented in red. In blue, we have the z-axis. In green here, which is a color that represents growth and harmony, I have yellow it is. The axis. This is the z-axis, so to give you a brief and concise translation of what I am drawing, we have here the x-axis. The x-axis, which is an axis that is typically and usually oriented horizontally, it extends from left to right in a horizontal direction. That is to say, it can also extend over there as well. It ultimately represents the lateral horizontal direction in 3D space. When you move an object along the x-axis, you move it either to the left, which will result in negative values, or to the right, which will result in positive values, for the y-axis. And I realize that I made a small mistake, which I will correct right away. It's not the z-axis here, it's the y-axis. I apologize for that. There you go, it's a bit nicer like this. So for the y-axis, we have an axis that is oriented vertically, and it extends from bottom to top. It represents the vertical direction in 3D space. When you move an object along the y-axis, you move it either downwards, a negative value, or upwards, a positive value. And we have the z-axis, the one in blue. So this z-axis is oriented in depth. That is to say, it extends from front to back, representing the direction of depth in 3D space. When you move an object along the z-axis, you are moving it either backward or forward. It may not be very clear to you, and I can understand that, so I will explain it a bit more clearly. So I am going to erase my little drawing to explain more clearly. When I select an object, I get roughly the same logo that appears here. So this is the representation of my coordinates. We call this a gizmo. This small gizmo is that little object there, and it will allow us to move objects and more. And the point I wanted to make with this little explanation just before is that it will allow you, even if you haven't understood everything exactly and it's a bit of gibberish, to familiarize yourself with 3D space, because 3D space is something that we don't necessarily master. In fact, because in everyday life, we do not realize the depth of things, the height of things, or the placement of objects in our space. All of this is actually instinctive. He has already acquired that throughout his life. And when you draw on a sheet of paper, of course, it has nothing to do with it. Here, you are in a 2D dimension, so you have height and width in this environment. We have 3 axes. This means that we can move up, down, vertically, and in depth. So I am here. If you remember the navigations, everything is fine. I carefully select my object, so my gizmo appears, and I will finally be able to move it precisely. simply by hovering over the small arrow, either the one for the y-axis, which I will write here, or the y-axis that always points upwards. So this is the y-axis, the x-axis, which is the one on the right, and the z-axis, z for depth. It will come naturally, don't worry. So if I want to move it vertically, my object, I take the y-axis, and yes, I hover over the arrow and click left. I hold the left click, and there I can move it. I can move it up as well as down. At the bottom there will be negative values, and at the top there will be positive values. I'll show you a little trick. If I press Ctrl Z, it goes back to its base. When I move it and place it here, I release the left click. If you look closely, right here in Translate Y, we have a value that has changed. Because if I press Ctrl Z, poof, it goes back to 0. It goes back to 0. And yes. But if I move it, there you go. We can see that the value is fluctuating. And if I put it below, meaning I move it negatively, well, there you go. The values start to become negative. That's what's crazy. So here I press Ctrl Z and I can move vertically. I would like to move in the vertical direction. To move vertically, I click on the arrow of the x-axis, so the red arrow, the arrow on the right, and bam. You can clearly see that I am moving. You can always see up here in the channel box, if you have it selected, that the values fluctuate based on where I place my object. So I can place it there. It will be 4.9 from the origin. The origin is right here. This is where we left it at the very beginning. So here you can have fun moving it wherever you want. And if I move it to the left, it will have negative values. Yes, because your axis is actually located at the origin of the object. The origin of the object is here. So I drew the axis over there, but it is actually valid at the center of the grid. Therefore, there will be negative values here. Just a little Ctrl Z. I'll take care of that instead. It will be simpler. Well, now we just need to control the z-axis. To control the z-axis, it's always the same. We take the arrow, slide it, and off we go. We generally go up for positive and down for negative. In short, I think you understand the principle. So here you have your first cube. Congratulations. Of course, we can combine things. I can do more than just this. Once I've done that, I can also move it up, and then it will have both values, and I can also position it in depth. All of this is combined with manipulating the viewport. It's super important to navigate in space. So you see that I can move it wherever it seems right, in my space. It's like Tetris, but in 3D. So instead of moving it in jerks, that is to say, I move it vertically. I raise it up, and then finally I lower it again. I move it forward in depth. And well, we're going to do something a bit simpler, which is that we can also move it. So it's much less precise, but we can move it as a whole, meaning it's like you're taking the cube with your hand and moving it around a little bit. Look, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take the center like this, hold the left click, and there we go. And you can see here in the top right of the channel box that the values are going crazy because they are all moving at the same time. Here I am moving it in depth, vertically and in height. So naturally, all the values are changing. And there you go. You have completed your first manipulation. Of course, it doesn't stop there. You can rotate and scale the object. So use the rotate tool to apply a rotation and the scale tool to change the size of the object. Here we had the move tool, so the movements. We have the rotate tool and we have the scale tool. I will write it down right here. Move. So it's just the arrow tap tap.
rotate, as we will see in a moment shortly, and scale. So, I have a little shortcut for using these three tools that I think will be the most useful throughout your life. These are the ones you will use all the time. They are the most important shortcuts, and you absolutely need to know them, because we can very easily find these tools, especially here on the left. Here, if we want this highlight, we have the move tool, here we have the rotate tool, and here we have the scale tool. So I can very well click here on the rotate tool, which we will manipulate right after. And we are going to draw it so that you can highlight it. We will draw it like this. I really like doing that. There you go. Today is not my day for drawing, but that's okay. And we are going to add an arrow. And the scale tool, which is right over here, as you can see, scale tool. So similarly, we are going to make a nice little drawing for it. So it looks quite a bit like the move tool, except that it's the little squares that are right there. And there you go. So to switch tools super quickly, you need to use these three shortcuts. We have W for the move tool, R for the scale tool, and E for the rotate tool. Basically, essentially. So move, W, scale, R, and rotate E. We'll write them right here. We have to rotate this. Pardon, I made at the end. Maybe I shouldn't have. And the scale is E. So you need a French keyboard. It's not great. I agree with you. But that's how it is, and not otherwise. So there you go. We have our three tools summarized with these three shortcuts. And I really want you to keep this in mind, to practice switching from the move tool to the rotate tool, to the scale tool, to the rotate tool, to the move tool, to the scale tool, to the rotate tool, to the move tool, to the scale tool, to the rotate tool, to the move tool, to the scale tool, and so on until it becomes second nature. This is super important because you will use it all the time. It's super important to be able to go from this to that super quickly. And you will see, I will give you a little demonstration. So we reviewed the move tool with W. Let's start with the rotate tool. So the rotate tool works similarly. We will take these little lines that are like the move tool, which represent the axes. We take them and bam, we can rotate our object. So we can rotate it on the Z-axis, which is for depth, and now it's a rotate. We can rotate it on the Z-axis, we can rotate it on the X-axis, and we can rotate it on the Y-axis. Well, it's a bit less intuitive with the rotate tool, I agree with you, but it is quite logical in the end. Here we rotate it on the Y-axis, because we are turning it on the axis that is here. The Y-axis, that is here. Got it. It's as if there is actually a little stick there, and we are just rotating around that stick a bit. This is the Y-axis, which is, do you see? And it's the same for the rest of the axis. So we really have all of these that are used. We have the Z-axis. And we simply just indeed have the X-axis. There you go. And similarly, we can, in essence, combine the two, just to completely vary our cube, essentially. And you can see, of course, that the rotate tool, move tool, and scale are reflected in this channel box, which we will look at in a bit more detail. But here are the coordinates for the translate, rotate, and scale. So this is intuitive, and a little tip is that you can click on it to reset everything to 0 if you don't feel like doing a Ctrl+Z, which is really useful. You act as if you want to write, you press it and then press 0, and it resets to 0. So that was for the move tool, for the rotate tool. So you can do it like this, But you can also touch the grayish parts and do like with the move tool, meaning you will move in all directions, and you can see that the coordinates are going crazy, actually, because they are all being calculated and fluctuating. And for the last one, for the scale, it's indeed actually this one. Well, it's exactly the same. Here is the x-axis. By taking it, it will increase the size on the x-axis. It can also increase the size on the axis. I put you back once more on the z-axis and on the y-axis. And of course, in the center, it's the same thing. We increase the size of all these axes at the same time. And that's why, if you look to the right, we have the same coordinates because we are increasing them simultaneously. However, if I do this, I only increase the size of x. If I do this, I only increase the size of z. And if I do this, I only increase the size of y. And there we go, we just come back by lowering everything in general. And I set it back to 1 instead of 0. Because at 0, it's as if we have no size. But that's why our object is no longer there. It must always have a minimum size of 1. That is to say, 1 unit, an average unit, which is equal to 1 meter by default. So, as you can see, it is quite important to know how to navigate between these three tools, because look at what I will be able to show you. You see how it's super easy when you know all the shortcuts. In a super intuitive way. You can really, positioning your object, for example, if I want to place it, you see it is like this. It is all disordered. I want to put it roughly on the sphere. I move it a little, I reduce its size, I press F to get closer, and I see that I am a little bit far away. It's more or less like that, but if you look closely, it works, and it's quite fast. In 2 seconds, you have your little peak that isn't centered at all, of course. By the way, if I may add this, it looks nicer like this, and here's our pretty little pop. So it's super important to manipulate. I really recommend that you definitely, absolutely use these 3 shortcuts, as it will make you much more comfortable for what comes next and allow you to proceed smoothly and swiftly.